But days after India Today put the national spotlight on this dubious IAS officer, Puja Khedkar, it looks like a dam has broken. In the last 1 week, since I decided this would be our channel's lead story, the sacred reputation of the UPSC, that one entity considered immune to fraud, is lying in tatters, in pieces. It's broken and probably can never be repaired. But worse than that, viewer, the story that we broke on Puja Khedkar has opened doors to India's favorite open secret: how the IAS and the bureaucracy in general is hugely compromised by corrupt officers, and how India's most elite civil service, the IAS, has been routinely and dangerously infiltrated by fraudsters and liars. In the 6 days since we broke the Puja Khedkar story, you would have noticed a sudden stream of allegations of similar fraud by many serving IAS officers, especially on social media. Now, the most common lie pertains to disability, and it is not clear that faking health issues has been a time-tested way. It's now totally clear that faking health issues has been a time-tested way to better your selection chances into the civil services. If the many alleged instances now bursting into the public hold true, it means that there is no shortage of Puja Khedkars in the Indian administrative service. Like her, many have faked caste poverty to enter the services. The Puja Khedkar story has captured national attention because of the brazenness of her alleged deceptions and the arrogance of her conduct. Even her fraud may have actually passed under the radar if it wasn't for her bratish, obnoxious sense of false entitlement in ordering people around. But what I can tell you for sure, viewer, is that there are hundreds, literally hundreds of IAS officers out there in our country who are smart enough not to call attention to themselves, smart enough to acknowledge now that they've dishonestly penetrated the IAS. They should shut up, work quietly, and pray that nobody revisits their admission file. Puja's monumental error was her blind disdain for rules and structure. She was by nature apparently obnoxious, perhaps, and that's why she invited attention to herself. And when it could no longer be sustained, the system is now acting against her, in no small part because of India Today's coverage. Many of you have acknowledged my stubborn focus on this story as something to be looked at as hope for real change in this country. Let me first show you some facts, and then I'll tell you what I plan to do with this story. India currently has, viewer, 5,300 IAS officers, which is a decent number, but it's still 850 short of the required sanctioned strength. Now, a minuscule 180 new IAS officers join the service every year via the UPSC Civil Services exam, like Puja Khedkar did. One of India's most visible former IAS officers, D. Subbarao, who went on to head the Reserve Bank of India, says, on record, I'm quoting him, he says, 25% of IAS officers are either corrupt, incompetent, or inefficient. Now, incompetence and inefficiency are unacceptable too, but since we're talking about fraud and corruption, let's assume that 1/3 of this 25% that Subbarao is talking about refers to corrupt IAS officers. That means a little over 8% of India's entire IAS cadre is corrupt. In other words, according to a leading IAS veteran, nationally respected luminary, over 400 IAS officers right now are corrupt and have used deceptive means to get to where they are. Now, you're probably thinking, maybe some of these officers got selected into the IAS using fair means, but became corrupt after they became IAS officers because of the nature of the job and because of the power that comes into their hands. Fair enough, good question. But are we going to ignore the fact, viewer, that Puja Khedkar's case demonstrates that corruption and dishonesty could begin with the very act of being selected to serve the public in the IAS? That those who infiltrate the Indian administrative service through unfair and false means are very likely to conduct their duties without the required levels of integrity. So I'm asking with all the strength at my command right now, from this platform, How many of the 400 corrupt IAS officers in this country actually rigged their selection process with false documents, lies, dishonesty about disability, caste and economic status? How many have successfully entered the system, giving thousands of honest IAS officers and candidates either a bad name or a loss of future with their rotten conduct? This is the question that I plan to ask every single day on my show. Indian administrative service reform is a vast topic that needs attention. But what about this very probable morass of corruption that lies right in front of us, demonstrated in the form of people like Puja Khedkar? That seems almost certain from the indicators we've seen play out in the last 6 days. Can the political system, seen as an inextricable part of bureaucratic corruption, bite the bullet and drain the proverbial swamp of corruption? These are all unlikely and far-fetched scenarios. These are highly romanticized, and I personally, being the cynic that I am, don't see it happening. I don't see anyone, for instance, ordering a nationwide recheck of every IAS officer's documents, especially those who've used caste or disability certificates. It doesn't work that way. And even if it did, even that could probably be rigged and gamed. So what now? Puja Khedkar isn't the first IAS officer, remember, to face the national spotlight over integrity issues. But it isn't often that a country that depends on the IAS reaches an inflection point, a proverbial iron is hot moment in which to call for real change. Whether a surgical scalpel or a sledgehammer will finally be a call taken by the political leadership. But for a government that has reputed itself on rooting out bureaucratic corruption at the highest levels, can it afford for the public to dwell on the idea of 400 Puja Khedkars spread across the nervous system of precisely what runs this country? Think about that.